All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. While you are looking at a slideshow of some of the titles that Third World Press has published and Professor Haki Madhubuti has published, I just want to welcome everyone into the room. We still have some folks coming in, and so I'm just going to talk a little bit while that's going on, just to give you all a little bit of a preview for what we have. My name is Natalie Stokes Peters, and I have worked with Black Classic Press for, oh my gosh, 23 years now. 2002? Yeah, about 23 years. Um, and so we've been around this block with Paul for a while, but I have not been doing this for as long as Paul has been publishing with Black Classic Press, which started in like 1972. I was a little babe back then, but he was mature enough to start his own publishing company. So I want to welcome everybody. We are going to have an exciting evening of conversation with Professor Haki Madhubuti. This is going to be so exciting. So, a few notes for housekeeping. We are going to have everyone on mute, so we will not be doing open questions. So, we're going to ask that everyone please put your um, questions in the chat, any comments you want to make in the chat. And I'm going to stop sharing really quickly while we are on it right there. So I'm going to ask that everyone please put their, um, all right, here I come here. All right. So everyone please put their questions in the chat tonight. Here I am. So y'all can see me now. All right. So, I'm not going to take too long on doing this. I see people are still coming in. We just sent out a last reminder, so I don't want people to miss things. So, few things that I do want to mention. If you look to my side, Black Classic Press, while it has been around since 1972, we are also the only publisher, Black publisher, and one of the few publishers who actually owns their own printing company. We have printed since the 80s, and I think that's right. Oh my gosh, I feel
95.
bad. 95. See,
Mhm.
I got corrected. That's the Deus Ex Machina. That's the man in charge over there, Paul Coates, who just corrected me. But we've been printing since 1995. We have a specialty in printing books and any other marketing materials that you may want. There will be links in the chat for you to our contact our office, or if you want to go to our website, which is a good day to print. If you or you know someone who is looking at publishing their own book, they want to print their own book, then please either pass along our information or use it to contact us, because we do well. So we got lots of great folks in the house tonight. And I do want to share that if you are on this call tonight and you register, you will be added to our email list, which will also be added to Third World Press's email list. If you don't want to get the emails, just hit unsubscribe. But we know that this has been a great tool for people to stay in touch with what we're doing in legacy publishing these days. With that, I am also going to ask if we have any folks here, and we can put it in the chat, that if there's any other authors or contributors who work with Third World Press, to please put your information in the chat so that we can acknowledge you. I also will ask any booksellers who may be in the room to also put their information in the chat so folks know where to go get their Black books. We got to buy from each other. This is how we stay around. So I see the Hudsons in here, some other folks. So please, please, please put that bookstore information in the chat. All right, with that, I am going to well, I've mentioned a little bit about Paul Coates. I'm going to bring in Paul Coates so that he can move this meeting along just a little bit. So let me find Paul and add him on there. All right. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you, Nat. Natalie is sometimes she's kind of modest, okay? So although she's been with us for 20, like she said, about 23 years, Nat really is the heart and the soul of Black Classic Press. She's the one who actually gets the work done. We meet, she's down in Texas, I'm up in Baltimore, but we meet regularly and coordinate the activities of Black Classic Press. So I just want to acknowledge Natalie before we start. She is in the room. I think she said something about the man in charge. And sisters and brothers who are on this call, we all know what that means. That means I do what she says do. As long as I do that, I'm cool. So look, welcome, 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 everybody. First of all, I really want to thank everyone for being here and joining in this very, very special conversation with Haki. Haki has been a factor in my life for well over 50 years. He's been a model, he's been an example. In fact, we don't have Black Classic Press as a publisher without the example of Third World Press, without the example of Broadside and some of the others. But really, Third World Press is the inspiration for Black Classic Press. And I'm so glad to be able to say that. We start our Zoom talks by grounding ourselves. And we have been blessed. We've really, really been blessed to have Sister Wangaza Bandeli with us on, I think, on all of our calls. Um, she begins this call with calmness, with a calling to the ancestors that always work because the calls really go great. And I'm going to introduce or ask Wangaza to step in and get us on the right track, Wangaza, before I go on and on and on, as some people say. So welcome, Wangaza, and thank you so much for being here. You've always answered the call, and I really, really appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Paul, I could do nothing but answer the call when the call is from you for the occasion such as this. So I am delighted to be with us. It's always just a blessing when we gather. And so, like any special time, any significant coming together of African people, we understand through our traditions that the coming together, the gathering is not complete until we call upon all who have gathered. And that's not just those of us who show up physically, but it includes our ancestors. It includes great God Almighty. It includes those entities and those spirits we don't know because we can't see them, but we know them in our hearts. And so in our tradition, I'm going to use a bit of a tree, a Khan spirituality here, call upon God Almighty and the deities and the ancestors. And at one point, I'm going to ask you to call on yours because somebody or somebody's spirit had you to be the person that shows up here today. And we give thanks. We give thanks. So in this moment, to complete our circle, we call first upon great God Almighty. We acknowledge the presence of Otamankama, Trediapon, and Yakamon. We call upon the Abosun, Asu Ojebi, Asu Otano, Asu Abana. We call upon great ancestors, and we, Lord knows, we got a legend of those who walk with us, who be with us, who stand in front of us and in back of us, on the right and to the left of us. And in this moment, we acknowledge your presence and we call upon you to complete our circle. We call upon those in our family, not just ancestors, but those who have taught us, who have brought us to this higher place, this higher elevation, this greater and grander elevation of who we really are. And so I invite each of you in this moment to call upon that ancestor, those ancestors, that auntie who taught you how to talk, and that granddaddy that taught you how to treat people, and that mama and that all them people, the ones that paid for your tuition, the ones that set you straight, the ones that had you to reach higher than you knew you thought you could, and until you actually achieve that thing that they had their sights on. Call upon them in your heart. And if you're on mute, call their names. Create a space inside of you, inside of the space where you reside, a seat right next to you, because they will come when we call. They will make their presence known. And for that, we give thanks. We give thanks for knowing that we did not invent ourselves, and therefore there are other entities and other possibilities for our uplift outside of what we know and who we are and what we see. And so we give thanks that we have Paul Coates and his staff at Black Classic Press, who has been walking alongside the ancestors with their help, with their assistance to create this thing we're going to engage this evening through the medium of Black Classic Press. We thank you, your family ancestors and those greater national ancestors who have caused this day to come into being. And most certainly we thank you, Haki Madhubuti, the ancestry, the people, the blood connections and the spiritual connections that give you the strength, have given you the strength all these decades to be who you are. And I particularly have to thank you, Haki Madhubuti. Great God, I was introduced to this man in my first year at Howard. You guided me. You caused me to hold on to that one thing, be what is required. And so I thank all those who sent you to Howard, and I thank all those that have you here today. One legend speaking to another. And let these two icons, these two walking archives, these two repositories of memory that is our medicine, let this gathering that they have configured, let them come together and let their words and their wisdom and their uncompromising love for African people feed us so that we can be nurtured, strengthened, and go forth and feed the masses. Thank you, great God Almighty, great ancestors, for this moment, this time, this historic day, for what it is. Amen.
Ashe.
Ashe. Well, guys, thank you so much. I'm ready to go to church now. I'm
Let's
ready.
go.
I'm ready to go down in the woods. Ready to go down in the woods.
Pass the damn basket.
Turn the pot upside down and do all that stuff.
Yes.
It's an honor.
So Paul, I gotta say this though. So in case our folks don't know this, you usually once a month get a newsletter from us that's called the Blacknificent newsletter. Wangaza is the curator and the organizer of that newsletter. And so this is the person who shares that knowledge with us each month. And I just want to make sure y'all know who y'all talking to.
Well, she does a wonderful job. It's a wonderful job.
Haki, that's the way to start it. Well, guys, thank you again and again and again and again and again. Thank you so much. Absolutely. And with that, we're going to begin this conversation. Many of the people on this call already know Haki Madhubuti. He's a father, and he's a husband. He's a community builder and always has been. He's a role model for me. He's a role model for the other Black publishers, some who we have on this call today, and he has been. He's the brother who connects us, our direct connection to Malcolm, to Dudley Randall, to Margaret Burroughs, and so much of our history, and so many of our ancestors who are no longer with us. The conversation we're gonna have today is really a conversation that explores Haki, it explores Third World Press. We're going to talk about the institutions that he's been a part of building, the people he's worked with, what he's doing now, what the challenges of the future hold. I'm going to ask very leading questions, okay? Because he speaks best for himself. He speaks best for himself. And I'm sure that people who've heard Haki speak before know that he don't need me to guide him that much. So every once in a while, though, I will break in with questions or something like that, just to deepen our conversation in a different direction. But for the most part, this is going to be Haki leading this thing. And so Haki, I want to begin, if we can, by, I mean, you're all these things. And especially when I think about Third World Press, but you didn't begin here. I'd like to go back to Don L. Lee.
Mm.
I'd like to go back to the time before third world press, the time before consciousness.
Mm.
You know, and if you can introduce Donnell Lee to us and how he moves through our world into consciousness, I think that would probably be a good place to start.
Thank you very much, Paul, and to your wonderful staff. I'm very appreciative of you all honoring me today, and I do not take it for granted. I realize the work that's gone into this, and I think I've always said in terms of our people, and with people like Paul Coates and the other legacy publishers, that none of this is a sacrifice. We made a commitment. And so therefore you find very few of us actually complaining. We knew the struggle, we knew what we had to do. But just as important, we understand our history. And that's critical. That is critical. Black people in this country, we all do what we've been taught to do. And most of us been taught by criminals and still are taught by criminals. I grew up, and I say this all over the country and part of the world, I grew up around pimps and hoes slamming Cadillac doors on the Lower East Side of Detroit, Michigan, and the West Side of Chicago. My mother, as beautiful as she is and was in the sex trade. She had to sell herself to take care of me and my sister. And she ended up dead, joining our ancestors at the age of 34. And I was 16. But prior to that, she demanded that I go to the Detroit Public Library and check out Black Boy by Richard Wright. I complained and did not want to go to a white library and ask a white librarian for a book with Black in the title, authored by a Black man who was supposedly critical of white America, because I hated myself. As simple as that. I had been taught from birth to hate myself. And even being brought up in the Black church, surrounded by people who supposed to know what's happening in the world, I still up hating myself. Well, she demanded that I go get the book. I did. So I went to the Detroit Public Library, which is the main library on Woodward Avenue in Chicago, in Detroit. Went to the stacks, found the book on the shelf, Black Boy, put it to my chest, and walked to an unpeopled section of the library. I was 14 years old, and began to read. And for the first time in my life, I was reading literature that was not an insult to my own personhood. I was reading words and sentences and paragraphs about us. Even though, as you know, those of us who read, and this was the unabridged Black Boy, and not had the whole volume had not been published yet because of the restrictions in this country. The publishing company didn't. In fact, I should have brought it with me. I got it right down here. But I read Black Boy in less than 24 hours. Gave it to my mother the next day, kissed her on the cheek, went back to the Detroit Public Library and checked out everything that Richard Wright had published. And one of the major books that he published that very few people really have any understanding of, or even knowledge of, is a book titled White Man Listen. White Man Listen is a book of essays, Blacks in psychology, in all different kinds of circumstances. But the major essay in the book for me was kind of a definition of Negro literature. And at that time, as you know, we were all Negroes, okay? At least defined as Negroes. And so I read, the essay on Black literature, made notes, and then I began to systematically read and study all of the authors that he had referenced, the fiction writers, the poets, the essayists, etc. That began to change my life, because what happened prior to that, I had no questions. But after reading Richard Wright and then begin to read all of the authors that he referenced, I had a whole lot of questions. you see. And so I grew up like most Black people. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1942. I'm 83 years old. And we moved, as John Oliver Killen said, up south to Detroit, and then eventually for me to Chicago. But my father, who was never there, but came with us from Arkansas to Michigan, was a gambler. He was he was a criminal. All right. My father never worked for white people. He always had his own stuff. All right. And so we got to, I believe it was Inkster, Michigan. And what a little money we had, he lost the money. And he left us. And so my mother, with these two children, we moved into Detroit looking for a place to live. And Jenny, when you go to a strange city, you go to what people generally call your first home. That's the church. So we went to the largest Black church in Detroit, Michigan, sit in the front row. And once the minister saw my mother, he couldn't even finish his damn sermon. All right. I mean, guy was just tripping over words because the beauty my mother was so beautiful that when we were walking on the street, she's holding my hand and my sister's hand. She not only stopped cars, she stopped buses. All right. And this is, I mean, so when she went to earn a living at Sonny Wilson's, one of the major bars at that time in Detroit, you couldn't keep the men off of her. And so if you know anything about the sex trade, you only got about 10 years. It's almost like an athlete. And so she didn't make the 10 years because she was murdered before she was 34 years old. So my point is, I grew up a lot. See, you know you're poor. You know you're poor when you grow up wearing used underwear. All right. That's how poor we were. And that buying all of our clothes from the Salvation Army, welfare stores, or most certainly used clothing stores. And I learned to accommodate. So I'm trying to put into context that my life was not unlike the great majority of Black people in this country then as is today. And just because I was light-skinned, it did not give me an open passage to nowhere. In fact, I think I was kind of beat up a little bit more because I was halfway literate, could read and write. So by reading Richard Wright and others, I never forget one of the first anthologies that I read was edited by Langston Hughes and Anna Bontemps. And reading the poets gave me answers and gave me a choice in life. And so very early, I began to make a decision that I am not going to stay here. And so once my mother was not with me anymore, with us, and the other part of it is my sister, Jacqueline, had her first child at 14 years old. This is not unusual in the Black community. She had her first child at 14 years old, a second child at 16, third child at 18, fourth child around 20. By the time she was 27, my sister had 6 children by 5 different fathers. Her life was pretty much over. And what happened to me after our mother left us, not by choice, I moved to Chicago to live with my father, who was a stranger. And once I got there, I see that he was basically a hustler, lived in a very nice place, and basically wanted to tell me what to do. I had not finished high school because I finished high school in Chicago. But I went to one of the best high schools in the country, Cass Tech in Chicago, in Detroit. And so once he put his hands on me, I backed him up, moved out, and finished up my time in Detroit at that time at the YMCA Hotel. Ended up joining the United States Army at 18. I'm leaving a lot of stuff out, but I joined the Army. And on the way to basic training, I'm reading Paul Robeson's Here I Stand. Paul Robeson and W.B. Du Bois If you read Yellow Black, the first 21 years of a poet's life, I adopted Paul Robeson and W. Du Bois as my grandfathers. All right. I got a picture of them in there and I got that under there. And so we go to basic training in 1960, and there are only 3 Black men in the company going to basic training in Fort Leavenworth, Missouri. I didn't tell you how I got in the Army because I was turned down by the Air Force because I was just too thin. I had a heart murmur, but I had no place. I see the military at that time, as is today, was a poor boy's answer to unemployment. Today it's the poor boys and poor girls' answer to unemployment. And so in basic training at Fort Leavenworth, Missouri, I got Paul Robeson's book in my hand with this big black magnificent face on the cover. And this is 1960. The drill sergeant saw his face on the cover. He snatched the book out of my hand and barked in my face, "What's your Negro mind doing reading that Black communist?" That's the first time I heard a double negative used so creatively, all right? And so he snatched the book and said, "All you women up against the bus." Now, of course, this is how they break you down, calling you women and stuff like that. This sexism it's uncontrollable in this country as much as the world. He held my book over his head and he commenced to tear the pages out the book and gave a page to each of his recruits and said, "Use this for toilet paper." Now I'm standing here, 18. This man destroyed my book. You know what I'm saying? Talk bad about Robeson. And I'm saying to myself, what am I doing here? Well, I'm in the United States Army because I have no place else to go. I don't have family other than my sister. I have an aunt in Chicago, but that's a long ways away. I got some cousins in Chicago. But for the most part, I'm on my own. Jackie's on her own. And so as he destroyed my book, I decided several things that stayed with me all of my life. Because by this time, I read Du Bois. I read Carter G. Woodson. You know, I'm a reader now. And in fact, the only suitcase I had going to basic training was a suitcase with books in it. All right, one change of underwear and clothes. And so what happened, I decided several things that morning, listeners and viewers. One, that I'm a Black man whose great grandmama had been raped by rapists. And we had been stolen from Africa. That basically had been also raped, but taken advantage of. And of course, imperialism made it clear as the Europeans in the Berlin Conference of the 1800s, you know, basically divided up Africa and gave each nation different names. And so even today, the names of African countries are not their legitimate names for the most part. And so as I stood there, I said, number one, I'm a man of African ancestry. I've got to make sure that I understand this and that I have got to get as much information about being African in America and how I got here. Number two, I knew that I was smarter than most of the men who would be teaching me. I would have been an officer in the United States Army because they had designated me to, after I took all the exams, to go to officer candidate school after basic training. But because I asked too many questions in basic training, that was off the table. So 1, 2, then I'm not going to dig ditches for these people. I'm going to try to make sure that I'm educated well enough that I am going to be doing something that would allow me to continue to study and to continue to work. The third thing was that, why am I here? Why are people here? After reading Woodson and Du Bois and others, right? By that time I was reading James Baldwin, you know, and others. I mean, Zora Neale Hurston and others, most certainly Langston Hughes. Why am I here? Now, why are we here? And I could never find an answer to that question that was all serviceable in all the different areas. All right. So I did my time, and I'd say my time in the military. But because I was always questioning and being a problem, I could not get a serious position even in the military. And so I was always, for the most part, disregarded. Okay. Which is fine with me. Finished basic training and then got to Missile Base in Arlington Heights, Illinois, and then eventually into Fort Bliss, Texas. And so my time was used, since they were discarding me, reading books. And the motto at that time was hurry up and wait in the military. And I waited with books. I would read a book, close to a book a day, and I write a 250-word essay on each book that I read. And then I began to compile a library and so forth. Got out of the military, and eventually, go read Yellow Black. You'll see some of this stuff detailed. But I got out of the military, but by that time I had found the Ebony Museum of Negro History, which was located on the south side of Chicago. And that's when I met Margaret Burroughs, Charlie Burroughs, and a Jewish historian by the name of Eugene Feldman. Yeah, that's Yellow Black. That's my mother there. And so when I went there, I knocked on the door, and Mr. Feldman, I'll say Professor Feldman, answered the door. I thought I was in the wrong place. 3806 South Michigan Avenue. And the museum started in their home. Okay. And so as I walked in, Mr. Feldman said, Professor Feldman said, can I help you, young man? So I'm looking for Mrs. Burroughs. And he took me to the kitchen. She's working on a linoleum cut. She's a world-class visual artist. And of course, I didn't know what a linoleum cut was. And she looked up to me, at me. I was in civilian clothes. I said, what do you want, boy? When I'm about 19, almost 20. And I said, well, I just turned 19. I said, I need some answers. I'm reading all these writers. You know, I have no answers for the questions they're posing. Marcus Garvey. I'm reading Garvey. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm staring at her. She said, are you okay? She is the first Black woman I met in 1962 with a natural. With a natural. And so what happened, she said, go upstairs and talk to my husband. So I go upstairs. There's a world-class library. He's sitting at a table, writing, reading. I thought he had some water down there by his right hand. He said, come on in, young man. You know, what's your name? I told him, Don Lee. So you want something to drink? I said, I'll take some water, sir. He said, well, this is vodka. All right. And if y'all know anything about me, I don't drink, no smoke. In fact, I'm plant-based. I'm a vegan. I've been a vegan for over 50 years. And so I said, I'll take, what I learned from Charlie Burroughs, that he had been raised partially in the USSR. Excuse me. Spoke Russian fluently. So he took me under his wing, introduced me to Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Marx and Lenin. I'm getting an early left education when I'm still in my teens. Okay. Fast forward, I become a volunteer at the museum, doing everything from, mopping floors to doing exhibit curating and stuff like that. And about 1965, when dear brother, I should say that my mentors are in this order. L. Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X, Margaret Burroughs and Charlie Burroughs, Dudley Randall, who had just started Broadside Press. See, Broadside Press started printing broadsides, single poems on sheet of paper, and selling them for under $1. Okay, but Malcolm had been assassinated, which affected all of us. You know, many of us, especially with military training, I went and replenished my stuff, okay, and then went pretty much underground a little bit. But Dudley Randall came to Chicago to meet with Margaret Burroughs around publishing a piece on Malcolm that would give us the truth about his legacy, his history, and so forth. And I asked him, could I put my poem in there? He said yes. And that's for Malcolm, that the white cover with the X on it. So Margaret Burroughs and Margaret Burroughs and Dudley Randall edited the book. About 2 or 3 weeks after that, I had published, well, in 1967, I published Think Black. I pulled my poems together. And Margaret said, why don't you go ahead and publish these? So I said, what do you mean? He said, just publish them. Just like we started a museum on our own right here, you can publish your own poems. So I pulled together the poems and went to a printer on the west side of Chicago, took the poems, about maybe 30 poems, and asked him how much it would cost me to publish about 300 or 400 copies. Well, I said, I can do this. And so that's how Third World Press actually started. A few months later, I had finished Black Pride, my second book. But maybe I should say something about Think Black. Why is it that my first book, which has been noted as one of the major books to come out in 1967, by of all the people, Skip Gates in this major anthology, because I wasn't thinking Negro anymore. That's why. I'm trying to essentially define myself as honestly and as truthfully and as close to my ancestry as possible. And so what happened, yes, Think Black. So Think Black has Africa in the middle. There is Think Black up there by Donna L. Lee. All right. And so I did about 300 or 400, sold them out in less than a week. This is 1967. It's hot. Okay. It's getting ready to get hotter. And my second book was Black Pride. I sent it to Broadside Press. Dudley Randall got back to me in less than a week and said, not only will we publish it, will you allow me to write the introduction? What can you say? All right. So what happened? In the meantime, Dudley said, you need to come to Detroit and sign the contract. And I wasn't thinking about a contract. But I said, okay, let me go to Detroit. This is it was still 1967, 67, 68, 67, yeah. And I went to Detroit, and Broadside Press is in his home. So now I see two Black budding institutions in the home of the founders. Margaret Burroughs and Charlie Burroughs with the Ebony Museum of Negro History, and Dudley Randall with Broadside Press. Now, the Ebony Museum of Negro History becomes the DuSable Museum of African American History because John H. Johnson threatened to sue Margaret Burroughs and Charlie Burroughs and the entire board for using ebony. Because John H. Johnson, of course, as you know, founded Ebony Magazine, founded Johnson Publishing Company, but Ebony Magazine was their flagship publication. And but his first publication was actually Negro Digest, which became Black World Magazine, all right, eventually. And I had something to do with that also. But to make a long story short, I know I'm going a little bit too long, is that I came back to Chicago, and I said, now I have some idea of what I'm going to do. and I was reading poetry around the city. And with the first $300 or $400, I brought a mimeograph machine. I lived in a basement apartment on the south side of Chicago, 6220 South Ada. It's in Inglewood. So those are the early Negro Digest, right? And so, excuse me. What happened, I was in the community college at that time, because when I came out of the military, I used a GI Bill of Right to go to school. I was in community college, which was very easy for me. I did 2 years in 1 year. And that's where I met Jahari Amini and Carolyn Rogers. And I had to publish, I already published Think Black. And so I'd ask them to come join me and let's just do this. They did, but after I published their books, which was Carolyn Rogers' Songs of Blackbird, and then Jahari Amini's, I forget the title of it, but Carolyn only stayed at the most a month. She left, okay, and began to continue to publish, but looking for a white publisher. During this period, we all are involved with OBASI, the Organization of Black American Culture, Writers Workshop. And the person that had that up was a man, a serious, brilliant brother by the name of Hort W. Fuller, who was the managing editor of Negro Digest, which became Black World Magazine. But also, he was one of the founders of OBASI, the Organization of Black American Culture. And so we became, all of this group became part of the Writers Workshop. And by the same time, I'm working with CORE, Congress of African Congress of Racial Equality. I'm also working with brothers and sisters in SNCC, Hitting the Streets. And what happened, King comes to the city with SCLC. So every march that King led in Chicago, I'm there on the march, all of them, okay? And you can see these crazy Neanderthal white people going crazy, all right? So now the next person who mentored me after Hort Fuller was Barbara Ann Sizemore, Dr. Barbara Ann Sizemore, who became the first Black superintendent of the DC school system. And she mentored me and my wife to become Dr. Carol Lee, who at that time was Carol Easton. And so the final person who impacted my life in a way in which changed me forever was Gwendolyn Brooks, the first Black to win the Pulitzer Prize. And so she was teaching members of the Black Stone Rangers poetry writing, working with the great Oscar Brown Jr. What people don't realize, Oscar Brown Jr. was actually one of the first rappers, if not the major rapper, coming out of the 60s, before Gil Scott-Heron, before me, before a lot of people. And so he was working with Margaret Burroughs. That's an early picture of Gwendolyn Brooks there. And Gwen went to him, or he came to her, because he was putting on this presentation of Opportunity Knock, and he needed these young people to be in the off-Broadway presentation. And so she began to teach him. So we, the writers of OBASI, went to meet Gwendolyn Brooks that one Saturday morning in the church on the south side of Chicago. And she was teaching, and we sit down politely until she finished. And then we approached her, introduced ourselves. And after the other writers left, I stayed there with her to give her a copy of Think Black. When I gave her the book, she looked at the cover, Africa, Don L. Lee, Think Black, Africa, Don L. Lee. She put the book to her heart, literally to her heart, and said, "Young man, I'm gonna read this tonight." And so this is 67, 68, I believe. And that started a 33-year familyhood. I was 25. Gwendolyn Brooks was 50. Well known, the first Black to win a Pulitzer Prize in any category. Loved her people, lived in the Black community. And she moved the workshop to her home. And we began to interact there. I'll end with this piece here because it started my teaching career. I had finished at Wilson Junior College, which now is Kennedy King Community College. And Gwen was teaching at Columbia College. And she had got a better position, I think, at the New York University, one of the universities in New York. And they needed someone to teach the literature course that Gwendolyn Brooks taught at Columbia. She recommended me. Now, I didn't have a graduate degree, so this was at Columbia College. Now, Columbia College had just started about 1 or 2, maybe 2 or 3 years earlier. So the president said, since he does not have the prerequisite credentials, I need to talk to him. So Gwen said, sure, I'm fine. So he said, I just need to talk to him about 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. Well, 25, 30 minutes turned into 3 hours because I began to teach him about the literature. And so I got the position. That was my first position in teaching at a college level. And of course, it went on and on. And there's so much. There is so much that I'm missing because Obasi was key in terms of the development of Black struggle in Chicago. And also my working with and helping to develop the whole Black arts movement. And I credit the whole Black arts movement with us building these institutional structures. If you don't have independent Black institutions, you don't have anything. The major institution in the Black community is the Black church. There are about 92, 93 Negro churches in the United States. And the reason these Negro churches are not really targeted in any serious way is because they're not a threat. They're not a threat. That is why over 2.5 million Black boys and girls and women and men are locked down in these damn prisons. You look at other categories of people, other cultures, you don't see the same thing. Their churches, their mosques, their synagogues are involved in keeping their children, their young people, out of prison. You know, there's a lot more I could say because we still in. I guess I can mention how I got to Cornell and then Howard and leave. That's when I met Paul. What happened? We were basically developing Black studies programs across the country, and I was publishing, especially in Black World, Black Negro Digest magazine, and my name got thrown in the mix to come and teach at Cornell University, and I went in for the interview, and the same thing happened. You know, I was able to win the trust of the students and the 1 or 2 faculty members that existed at that time who were Black. And the students wanted Don L.E. And so they offered me the position as a poet in residence at Cornell University. This was 1968. And I got letters of recommendation from Gwendolyn Brooks, Hort Fuller, and Deli Randall. So the students said, we want him. The faculty said, well, yeah, he can come, but we're not going to accredit the course because he's not, credentialed at the level that we need. And so I said, why in the hell would I move to cold-ass Ithaca, New York, and teach a non-credited course or 2 courses? I'm not doing that. So the students said, don't worry, we got this. They went to the English department and jacked them up. I got a call from the chair of the English department, who was, I could hear it in his voice, he was really afraid. And he said, because I was teaching at Columbia College, I had a job. He said, Professor, can you come in and talk to us about what you're going to do, and et cetera, so we can make a decision around credit and courses? I said, of course, send me a ticket, which they did. Went into this real, very large room in the English building, I guess it was. All these white, long dead professors around the wall. There was 5 white men who were tenured senior professors in the department gonna quiz me on Black literature. I thought it was a joke. All right, I didn't tell them that, but I knew that this was not gonna be serious. I knew that right away. I knew about it, the questions around the literature, around the books that they were questioning me, which was basically Native Son, Black Boy, Invisible Man, maybe Third Generation by Chester Himes, I'm not sure. But as the questions went around the table, it was very clear to me that these men had not read the literature. So I know I got this. All right. So we went around the second round of questions. And as we went around, they asked me a question about a piece of literature. I would answer the question, then I would ask that person a question about that author and another piece of literature that he or she had published. Couldn't answer it. They couldn't even answer the question. Got around to maybe the third or fourth person, and the same thing was happening. And I said, had you read, Richard Wright's Uncle Tom's Children? So he laid back in the seat, man, and say, I think you're mistaken. You mean Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Children? Uncle Tom's Cabin. I'm sorry, Uncle Tom's Cabin. I said, no, I'm talking about Richard Wright's Uncle Tom's Children, book of short stories. I went in my bag and pulled it out, put it on the table. The guy turned 50 different colors. And before he got to the chair of the department where we're going to interact, he said, welcome to Cornell. Your course is accredited. All right. So now I'm at Cornell University, the first Black poet in the nation to be a Black poet in residence at an Ivy League university. David Lorenz, one of the finest writers, who was on the staff at Ebony Magazine, whom we were close friends because I was reading poetry with musicians in bars and taverns in Chicago. And I never forget this. I was reading with some of the musicians at the New Sutherland Lounge. And I read this poem, I think it's in the something about in the interest of Black salvation. That was a poem. And the last 3 or 4 lines of the poem reads, Jesus saves, Jesus saves, Jesus saves S&H green stamps. The place blew up, all right? And one of the persons who just laughed off his stool at the bar was David Lorenz. And that's how we became close. So when I moved to Ithaca, New York, and became the first Black poet in residence, he pitched it to John H. Johnson. So he and the Pulitzer Prize winning photographer, Monita Sneak, came to Cornell, followed me around, and that's how the article appeared in Ebony Magazine. While at the same time, I had finished my third book, which is titled Don't Cry, Scream. Gwendolyn Brooks wrote the introduction. And when the book hit, and when the article hit, it blew up. In less than a year, sold over 75,000 copies. 75,000 copies. That's Don't Cry, Scream. Okay. And as a result of that, I'm on the national and international map. All right. And it was a bit much. We had already, we started Third World Press. We moved Third World Press to storefront and so forth. and the rest becomes history. There's a lot more. I'm missing a lot. Forgive me, but
It's Haki, it's really okay because really you've given a great narrative and a great beginning. We're going to have an opportunity because I'm going to ask you some of the names you've already called, but I'm going to ask you some other names and just have you comment on them. And that'll give you an opportunity to go back over, just to go back over. Um, Natalie, can I go ahead with a few questions first? And because I know we got a lot of questions in the chat, and I know we want to get to that, and we are just about at that 7 o'clock point.
Yeah,
So can I go ahead?
I think you should go ahead and do that. It sounds like we need to give Professor Madhubuti his voice a break a little bit. So
Haki is used to this. Haki can go on. He can do this. He can do this. I'm not even going to say, hey, Haki, I'm not even going to say, are you okay, brother? Okay.
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah. Yeah. I'm good.
Look, so Haki, I'm going to ask you some names.
Okay.
I'm gonna call out some names. If you would respond to them, and I'll ask you to tighten it in a little bit because I got about 15, 20 names.
Okay.
But you can really do what you want to do with it. Just know that I've got some others for you. Okay.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
First off is Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz.
Oh, wow. Malcolm was my first mentor. Never met him. But he was in he after he came out of prison, as you know, he joined the Nation of Islam. And whatever he wrote, wherever he spoke, I would try to listen and try to get as much information. And I admired him so much, so much. Because he comes from the underside just like I did. Except I didn't go the prison route, all right? And I didn't go the hustler route at all. I didn't go the white woman route. You know what I'm saying? That essentially, I'm Black on the inside and outside. But Malcolm, once he was locked down and got exposed to the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam, it turned him around and it helped to turn the nation into rather than a local few states, into a national, major organization and movement. I met Betty after Malcolm had been assassinated. The city of Chicago built a college on the west side of Chicago, Malcolm X Community College. Betty Shabazz came in for the naming of the college. And I was on the plane going back to New York with her, not with her, but on the plane going to speak somewhere. And she was on the plane, so I moved up from my seat and sat next to Betty. We began to talk. All right. And that talk turned us into a family. And we were very close because, she would call me and I introduced her to my wife, Safisha, Dr. Carol D. Lee. And we were part of her life. And when we began to do the National Black Holistic Society conferences with these 10 Black men, which is very, very important, I invited Betty to come down to the retreat site to speak. And of course, once she passed, or once she died, we named the retreat site after Betty Shabazz. But she was serious. Dr. Betty Shabazz was, I say, serious as a first love. And there's a lot more, but I was very close to her and the family. And what happened prior to her passing, one of her daughters, I think it was Gabila, got trapped into a sting operation where they accused her of trying to plan the assassination of Farrakhan. I knew that was a lie. and so did Betty, Dr. Shabazz. And so she called me and asked me, could I get to Minister Farrakhan? And I got a whole history there. I didn't go into that, but yes, I said, sure, I can get to him. And just tell him that this was a setup. So I said, okay, where are you? She said, I'm on my way to St. Paul, Minnesota. That's where her daughter was living. And she was hooked up with this Neanderthal, white boy, who set her up. I said, okay, I'll get in touch with Farrakhan, and then I'll see you tomorrow. I'm coming down there. What happened was I got to Minister Farrakhan without any difficulty. And I said, look, brother, this is a lie. This is a setup. And he said, Haki, I know this. I know it. Can you come stand with me tomorrow? I'm gonna do a press conference. I said, no, I gotta go to St. Paul, Minnesota, to stand with Betty. I don't know who's there with her, So I did. He did the first press conference, and he did what he was supposed to do. And I ended up going to St. Paul. I walked into the courthouse that morning. She's in a corner sitting on a bench by herself with her head turned to the wall. So I walked over, put my hands on her, and say, hey, Betty, sister, you okay? This is the first time I saw Betty Shabazz cry. Mm. It hit me, boom. What am I going to do? She said, they're trying to put my baby in prison. I said, it's not going to happen. Attorney Sawyer was there. The white attorney who did a whole lot of work during that period was there with her. And they were able to maneuver and keep her out of jail. And I said, well, what do you need? I'm talking to Betty now. We need some money. So I get back to Chicago and I meet with Farrakhan and some of his people. I say, look, we need to raise some money to keep our young sister out of prison. So as you know, there was this division between the Shabazz family and the Farrakhan family. So I propose that we do a joining at the Apollo in New York. And of course, Sawyer owned the Apollo at that time, Attorney Sawyers. And I went to him and saying, can we use the Apollo to do this? He said, of course. That's when we began to set this a night to earn money for just her Shabazz family. Prior to that, we had to meet in order to begin to finalize. Brother Leonard Muhammad was the chief of staff for the minister. So I'm dealing with him, dealing with the minister. I'm now the spokesperson for the family around doing this. And so, but for us to make it real, I got to bring Betty and Farrakhan together prior to the event. I'm in Chicago. Betty's in New Jersey. Farrakhan's in Chicago. So we set up a time and date to meet. I'm flying in on United Airlines. The Farrakhan family and security, they flying in on American Airlines. My flight is deterred because of weather taking us into Philadelphia. Farrakhan gets to the LaGuardia airport. I'm not there yet. Betty and I had made a decision to meet at the Grand Plaza Hotel in New York, right outside the hotel, outside the airport, to strategize. I'm not there. The minister's security and other people in the nation, they are at the restaurant where Betty is sitting by herself, without any other brothers, anyway. There was another brother supposed to meet me there to help negotiate. I'm not going to mention his name, but he didn't show up. The flight takes off from Philadelphia, comes into LaGuardia. I catch a cab over to the Grand Plaza. She's about to leave. She's on pins and needles. She's calling my home. She's calling Safisha. Where's Haki? Where's Haki? And so what happened, I get there. We moved to another table to get away from his people. And we talk. I said, Betty, I see how tense you are and how, how this is weighing on you. Let me handle it. I'll do it. She said, okay. They had secured a room over in LaGuardia. Just before that high security, you can just walk into the airport without any difficulty. They had secured a room. They are already there. I mean, we walk in, his son, one of his sons, the security, Leonard, his wife, they're all there. So I walk in with Betty, just the two of us. But you must understand that my history with Farrakhan goes back years before that. The Nation of Islam under Minister Farrakhan partially started in my home. I'm not going through all that now. It's just not the time to do it. Because I met Farrakhan in 1977 in Lagos, Nigeria, where I and Abanajon Brown, the great Abanajon Brown, we were the co-chairs of the Midwest movement of Festac, which was the international body of movement of brothers and sisters from around the world that convened in Lagos, Nigeria, to celebrate our art forms in all the different areas. They chose me to be one of the spokespersons, but to head up the compound that the African American writers and poets and musicians are to live. I got a call from Stevie Wonder. And Stevie Wonder said, hey, Brother Haki, I think he may even call me even Brother Don, I'm not even sure. I think it was Brother Don, because I had just changed my name. He said, can I come down? Can we? I said, are you serious? This is your site, man. This is where you're supposed to be at one level. They had him down at the fancy hotel downtown Lagos. He shows up, and in the entourage is Farrakhan. The minister, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, had passed. They fighting. Who's going to take over the nation? Farrakhan is unsure of himself at that point. And I know a lot of whole stuff. I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, he was thinking about going back into music. So he's with Stevie Wonder. And, we introduced and so forth. And what happened about a week or 2 weeks after we get back from Lagos, I get a call from a brother by the name of Ibrahim Muhammad. He said, Brother Haki, the minister want to talk to you. And I said, well, about what? He said, he's thinking about bringing the Nation of Islam back. And he want to talk to the leaders here in Chicago. I said, well, I'm not a leader. I'm a poet, trying to build these institutions, but I'm not a leader in the sense that you're thinking. But I know the leaders. And I'll be glad to pull them together so we can talk. Because all of us want to know what was Farrakhan's involvement with the assassination of Malcolm. I can't go there at this point. Mm-hmm. So that's how I met him, right? And how we began to work with him in order to begin to build the Nation of Islam. So Betty has a position with the Farrakhan family, with him, and I'm not going to go into that either because it's just not right. This is not the right time to do it. Well, we did hook up. So I'm speaking for Betty at the meeting, and we work it out, and that we're going to do this major fundraiser at the Apollo, and all the money will go to the Shabazz family, to Betty Shabazz's family, and the children, the girls, at that point, young women, and that's how it happened. I need to stop there, but I'm just saying that the point is, you can go to YouTube and actually see the event.
Okay. Haki, and so Natalie will stop about 7:15. I'll just turn it over. but I do want to make sure that Haki does what I know he wants to do. So I'm going to ask a question because I know you want to answer this question. The people that I have on, I've got, as I said, I've got about 10, 12 people here, but one of the names that I have is Carol Lee.
Oh, my wife. Yeah. I met Carol Lee in struggle. I think Barbara Ann Sizemore at that time was the principal of one of the major K-8 schools. And she was there with other sisters and some brothers teaching after school, reading and writing. She was finishing up a master's degree at the University of Chicago. She's writing her master's thesis on the Black Arts Movement. They asked me to come speak, which I did. And she asked me because she, interviewed me and so forth, which I, of course, said yes. And that started our relationship because I had already started Third World Press, and we in the beginning getting ready to start the Institute of Positive Education. And she often reminds me, you asked me for my phone number and name and all that stuff, and I gave it to you. But you failed to mention that you asked most of the women there for their names and phone numbers, you know what I'm saying? So I forgot all about that. But anyway, she reminded me. But I told her, well, I called you though, right? And that started, over 50 years, 55 years in terms of our relationship. We dated for over 6 years because shortly after I left Cornell, I came to teach at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Then I got a call from Andrew Billingsley at Howard to consider coming to become the first Black poet in residence at Howard University, along with John Oliver Killens, who was the first Black fiction writer at Howard University. And that's another whole story which I didn't have a chance to go into. They're talking about the importance of John Oliver Killens. Because by that time, Gwendolyn Brooks had impacted my life at a very serious level. And the reason I never published a book with white publishers was not because I hadn't been, asked to. In fact, the great biographer, Paula Gettings, came to Chicago to recruit me for Random House. And she had not published the book on Ida B. Wells or even published When and Where We Enter yet. But she was an editor at Random House. And Don't Cry Scream had sold so well, they say, go get Don Lee. All right. So she came to Chicago, recruited me. And I told Paula that I'm not leaving Broadside Press, but I never been to New York. Can you bring me to New York on the pretext of showing me where I would be a part of if I chose to leave Broadside Press? So as she taking me around the building, she takes me into the head editor for Black literature. And this sister who had not really published that much at that point, her name was Toni Morrison. He said, Don, we're waiting on you. Okay. And I said, Toni, I'm not coming. I'm not leaving Broadside Press for this stuff. And they offered me a lot of, a little bit of money and stuff like that. And so, but Gwendolyn Brooks, again, we had talked her on leaving Harper and Row. Harper and Row was a major publisher of literary works. And they were in the process of publishing her last book, In the Mecca. But Gwen decided to leave Harper and Row and go to Broadside Press. There is so much, all right? But I just thought Gwendolyn Brooks was a major influence on me.
Got it.
No doubt about it.
So,
and go ahead, I'm sorry.
So yeah, Haki. So I see Natalie's on, and we're at the 7:15. Pardon me for interrupting. And the folks who've come in late, what we did this in a way that I really wanted Haki just to talk, and just to tell us and open some doors for us. We're asking a few questions, but we're going to move over, and Natalie has questions, I think, that people have put in the chat, some of the questions, and depending on how that goes, I'll get back. Because Haki, I particularly want to make sure that we talk about the Institute for Positive Education, that we talk about the Betty Shabazz charter schools. So I want to make sure that we get all of that in, and particularly Sapisha's role
Right.
in that. And as well as, I mean, you've always had a good body of people in Chicago there, a community, to help you build those institutions.
Right.
So Nat, I'm going to pass it over to you for questions. I do want to say, as we said earlier, this is being recorded as we talk. It will be available on the Black Classic Press site, and Third World Press will probably have a link up, I would imagine, to it as well.
Right.
So folks who missed the first part of it, you will be able to come back in. And that one is especially for Margaret Busby. Margaret Busby is on from England. Margaret still is one of the premier publishing people in the country, but she in the UK, but she also was the first Black female publisher, maybe the first Black publisher of any scale, and I love her to death. So she had a question in chat, and my technical skills didn't allow me to get to it, but Margaret, we are going to do it, okay? Nat, I'm going to go on mute.
All righty. I gotta look to see. I don't know if I see hers over here. So I had Stephanie Henderson and Xavier Frank helping me out with the questions here. I want to thank them for that. And so here's a question. This is the people, of course, want to hear about Institute. You know, they want to do that. They want to know about that, which I think we're going to address. But here's something to just break the story a little bit. Someone wants to know, and I'm just going to ask you for one each. Someone has asked, what is Paul's favorite title for Third World from Third World Press or Haki? And they've asked Haki, what is his favorite Black Classic Press title?
Oh,
wow.
mine is easy. If I can go first, Haki. Mine is very, very easy, and I've told Haki this many times. Plan the Planet is always my favorite book. And I think it's my favorite because I read that book before starting Black Classic Press. I read that book over and over when I was thinking about Black Classic Press. And there's one essay in there, and Haki would have to correct me on the title, but it deals with who's responsible for publishing Black books.
Right, right.
You know, who is and it's such a profound question. And the answer is obvious. You know, our community, Black folks are responsible for publishing Black books. And I just thought, I really think that's one of the more brilliant essays that I had read at that time, and I haven't had my hands on it in a while, but I still think it's brilliant. And it challenged me. It really, really challenged me. And I think challenged the generation that we have the responsibility to speak for ourselves as a community. I think, Haki, you make the point in there. Italians are not going to that's the old cover. Italians are not going to allow Black people to tell their story, and they shouldn't.
No.
It's not our responsibility we're responsible for telling our own stories. And it goes back to that whole thing about a self-narrating voice. And it inspired me so much. And even the thought of it still inspires me, Haki.
Well, we're bringing it back out, 50th.
Wonderful. I'm looking for it.
And Dr. Maisha T. Wynn wrote the introduction for it.
Great.
And she takes over a major organization where my wife is now I think it's in Denver. The name will come to me. But the problem was for us, all of us, was that Black people did not read poetry in mass. Okay. And I'm thinking to myself, how can I reach these street brothers and sisters without writing prose? And I can write the prose in a way in which I can incorporate poetry, but most certainly can hit on subjects and plan. I mean, even the title of the book, Plan the Planet. I'm saying we need to take this, MF, okay? That's it. That's where the title came from, Plan to Planet. All right. And when you look at the table of content for the book, essentially, I try to cover, in my own naivety, try to cover too much. All right. Very short essays, but essays, I thought, for me, it's like tap dancing or like doo-wop. You know what I'm saying? You put the Dells on, they got you. Boom. All right. So I was trying to do that at one point because music was always a part of my life. I grew up with doo-wop and jazz. So I attempted to play the trumpet until I heard Louis Armstrong. Really listened to him. I said, there's no way in the world I can do that. So I need to put this trumpet down, right? Ended up pounding my horn when I went into the military. So that's where Plan to Plan came from. Okay, so my first book of essays. And it went through 10 or 15 different printings. You know, I don't know why we ever took it out of print. But I want to pause for favorite book. The book he did with Jonathan, the brother who essentially ended up in prison, who was a freedom fighter. I don't remember the title now, but
Brother You Choose, yeah.
What was that?
The Brother You Choose. You're talking about Eddie Conway?
Yeah. Which one?
You're talking about Eddie Conway?
No.
Okay.
Jonathan.
Is it Blood in My Eye?
Yeah, Blood in My Eye.
Blood in My Eye. Sure.
Yeah, Blood in the Eye. And so that was one of the favorites for me. And then the next one was the he had published his a Jewish writer, Ginsburg, I think his name was, around the murder, the lynching of Black people. So I fell in love with what he was doing, and he had the right name for the press, Black Classic Press. And we became very close. But see, while I was at Howard, I stayed at Howard from 1970 to 78. And Howard paid my way to travel between DC and Chicago every week for 8 years. All right. I had a different kind of cachet there at Donnell Lee, you know what I'm saying? And, first Black poet in residence at Howard University. And working there with Colin Cox, Judy Richardson, Charlie Cobb of SNCC, and building Drum and Spirit Bookstore. Okay. That was their task, but Drum and Spirit Bookstore had a Drum and Spirit publishing company also. And the first book that they published, I wrote the introduction to. So this publishing, and in Blind the Planet, the essay I think you're positing is the one I'm truly saying we need a national distribution company. Okay. And so we're trying to develop that. And we had a conference here in Chicago to try to get it going. But the problem with our people, we don't have no money. I'm serious. I don't care if these people think they got some money. No, you don't have any money. When a white boy can lose $50 billion, that's when you're talking about some money. Talking about Elon Musk, And we didn't get very political because, I got very serious ideas about the political thing here in this country. But that's basically
okay. Excuse me, Nat, you got it?
Yeah, you want me to do another one, or you want to go? Okay. So we, in general, and we're probably flipping a little bit here. The last thing that Professor Madhubuti mentioned is on the minds of several of our folks, and it's sort of pronged several different ways. And one is, how do we support, our Black publishers, which I think we all know the answer to some of that. And the other is, given the energy right now in modern book banning and things of that nature, folks want to know, what can they do? So what would you all suggest that folks do in the space and the energy that we're in right now?
Well, buy our books, number one. But for Third World Press, we're 501c3. So we're charity. You can make donations to thirdworldpressfoundation.org. And we do need serious money. I'm not sure what about Paul and Wade and Casahun, but I've never taken a salary. I've always worked in the academy and used that money to put back into the press, while at the same time I'm traveling around the nation, about 38 states, traveling internationally, these 4 continents. Been to Africa about 10, 11 times, if not more. Met with 4 presidents. But that'll be it. Buy books and make donations.
Paul, is there anything you want to say? Because that's the
I'm gonna
gist
leave
of
the
it.
floor. I'm gonna leave the floor for Haki. We'll have other conversations to talk about that, and so I'm gonna leave the floor and ask you to move on to the next question. I agree. Support us, volunteers. We have folks on the call during today. And I'm hoping that's a conversation we can get into a little bit later.
All right, so we're gonna pull out the this title here. I'm bringing it up right now on my screen. Folks want to know about it. You know what's coming, right? People want to hear you talk about that for a little bit.
I sent you all a copy of the Black Books Bulletin, which I didn't talk about at all. With the Black Books Bulletin, we had done a special issue on Blacks and Jews back in the late 70s, I think 78. And I had met Eugene Feldman back in 62, who was Jewish. And he had began to school me on Israel and more importantly on the whole question of Zionism and how the Nakba became central to the taking of occupied Palestine. Okay? And so, and I visited Israel, occupied Palestine, back in the 80s, and had a chance to go to the West Bank, had a chance to go to Gaza, had a chance to really travel around Israel at that time. And I was the guest of the International Hebrew Israelites. They brought me over there, put me up, and took care of me while I was there. These are Black people, all right, from Chicago for the most part. And so I was familiar with what was happening and studied. I'm in my library now, and I have at least 4,000 or 5,000 books on Jews and Arabs, the whole Middle East. Okay? So I've studied this whole area. And so when the October 7th thing broke out, I was not surprised, number one, understanding the history of Palestinians and Israelis. But what bothered me so much was that it was not, we're going to go in and find the people who committed 7th, because I don't believe you should, go to war against any civilians, especially civilian children, whether they're Jews or Arabs or whatever the case may be. But and it was not really a war, because nations will go to war. You know what I'm saying? The Palestinians didn't have a nation, still don't have a nation. But they have been described mainly as a group of men and women, primarily men, who are terrorists. And once that name is put on you, you can't get it off of you. But the children are not terrorists. That's for sure. And as I began to see these babies being killed, these teenagers being killed, and for the most part, we don't know their names, and the Israelis are going in, bombing the buildings, and the babies and children are under the rubbish and so forth. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. And it's not like I hadn't seen this kind of damage before because I've been to Haiti. If you go to Haiti, you're gonna cry. I'm telling you. But the difference here is that our tax money is going for this. So I called Mark Lamont Hill, and I called Keith Gilliard and said, would y'all like to come in with me on doing an edited volume on what's happening in Gaza to our babies, to the children? And actually, the working title was For Our Children. And they said yes. That's how we started and how we got the book out. And it has been a work of, it was a testing time. I guess that's the best way to put it. Because it's been very difficult at one level. And so it's out. And none of us have been paid, and we're not, and all, so the entire title is The Children of God of Gaza. The progressive, excuse me, progressive Black, brown, and Jewish writers and poets speak out. We had to have Jewish writers and poets to make sure you're not saying we're anti-Semitic. We're anti-Zionists. That's basically it.
Okay. Can you speak on some of the difficulties? I mean, I know bringing any book out is difficult, and you just made a statement that you had to have Jewish writers so it wouldn't be viewed as anti-Semitic, and I don't know that has helped you any, because you still can get labeled the way they flip that around. But I'm just curious, can you share some of the difficulties in getting this out? Nat, I'm sorry if I jumped in on that. Is that okay?
Well, fortunately, we had published Jewish writers before at Thorough Press. And actually, one of our major books is the book on Martin Luther King Way, where this Jewish writer, Jonathan T. Love, and his photographer, they're going across the country documenting all the Martin Luther King highways and byways and avenues. So he ended up in Chicago, wanting to, because we're a few blocks from Martin Luther King Drive, but being in the vicinity, he wanted to try to do something with us in it. And then he asked me would I write the forward to the book. I didn't commit myself until I saw the book. I said, this is really wonderful. Yes. Yeah. But we couldn't afford to do it. So he was with a major publisher. I said, you need to just stay with the publisher. I write the forward, but you can stay with the major publisher. That was 20 years ago. And this year, or was it last year? Anyway, we got the rights to the book and we republished it because so it's a part of our titles now. So I knew and still know and have relationships with Jewish people who are not Zionists. And I talked to them about it. And of course, Jonathan T. Love, he's in the book. He has a major essay in the book. And he and others helped us to get the Jewish writers in for the book. And I'm 83 years old. I've been beat up so many times, I don't even know what a beating is. Right? And because when we did the Blacks and Jews Black Books Bulletin, they really whooped me real bad. But we survived that and we continue going. And I don't like to even use the word survival. We progress. We continue to function and continue to. We're not in the business of belittling or making small or developing negative slogans about any people. The Jewish people have thousands of years of history. And it seems like everybody they've been in contact with are trying to destroy them at one level. You know. But I saw what was happening in occupied Palestine with our babies there, with the children, that they've taken on the mantle of destroyer, which did not make any kind of sense. But what's most importantly about this whole thing that I think just as important are the Jewish students, the young, they got the organization, not in my name, right? You see these Jewish young people who said, we're not selling for this. And if they're not selling for it, I'm not going to sell for it either. And that's how it, came about and began to nurture itself. Okay. But what's happening now as we continue on is that Gaza has been destroyed. There's no going back to Gaza unless you're going to put billions and billions and billions of dollars in it. Then you're talking about 10 years or more to rebuild it. The problem is, what do you do with 2 million plus Palestinians who are homeless now with the children? Okay. And we Black people, and part of my essay was that the genocide against Black people that continues on today. So I'm trying to make it a comparison. That we didn't come to America first class TWA. A group of people from Europe snatched us from a continent and sprinkled us around the Western world to build for them. So you come to this country and you literally take it from Native Americans. And the Native Americans say, you done took my land, I'm not going to work it for you. So you go to get Africa to get the Africans to work the land. And when I started off saying we all do what we've been taught to do, the great majority of Black people in this country do not have any kind of understanding of our association with Africa. One. Number two, do not understand what happened during the Berlin Conference back in the 1800s in terms of the carving up Africa in terms of Europeans. And three, do not recognize essentially that Africa is still not free at one level itself, and especially South Africa. And I've been to these nations. So South Africa, 85% of the land is still owned by white people. Okay. So you have all these Black people in these service jobs, you have them in the political positions and so forth. But in terms of really control South Africa, no. And you can go through, Nigeria had a war, the Biafran War. That's when I first met Wole Soyinka. And that's another whole subject. So this is it. How do we move toward a level of empowerment ourselves? And that's why we're trying to build independent Black institutions. And we got we got these schools, we got, at one time we even bought a farm, man. We had a farm in South Haven, Michigan. So where we can get our babies out of these cities and show them where the land. So, land is the only thing that nobody nowhere is making any more of. And so Black people must rather have a Maybach or a Benz or a closet full of tailored suits than land. You see. So when people say, well, what's your price, Haki? Is that you say you can't be bought? Everybody can be bought. What's your price? And I basically said 5 states. Because I remember what the new Republic of New Africa was about, what Obadeli was about, what Cheikh Lumumba was about, Hannibal Afrique was about. Okay, land is critical, and now we have a criminal president in the White House with his criminal family, who's basically tearing the nation up. And somehow we're supposed to sit back and not say anything. And what is happening now, they're using fear to split us, to tear the nation apart. You see. And we've got to understand essentially, if we're going to not only survive, but thrive, we got to fight. We got to fight. And keep on going. And not destroy each other. Because generally the white people who are essentially fighting out there, they're working class and middle class, just like we are. You see. And now we can come together at another level and hopefully destroy this evil person and his family, corrupt family, from destroying this nation.
Nat, I know we're at about the 20-minute mark. And I see you've got Eugenia Collier.
Oh, Eugenia Collier, wow.
There she is. She
Let
just
Eugenia let us speak.
I just like popping her up on the screen. She's over there. Eugenia just celebrated her 97th birthday. So she
Watch out.
is, yes, absolutely. So she could go on. She could go on just as long as Professor Madhubuti, if not longer.
Well,
But I
Eugenia
just want to
Collier,
put her up there and acknowledge her.
yeah, Eugenia Collier and Richard Long. They did this
Yes.
major book back
Yeah.
in, I guess it was the 70s now.
Mhm.
And they put my work in there, and I love both of them.
Mhm.
And we did publish Richard Long's last book of poetry that came out.
Mhm.
But Eugenia Collier, she's one of the brilliant writers, critics, and I love her to death. Lord. I'm glad she's still hanging in there.
Yep.
She is, and she's mastered Zoom. So, Professor Madhubuti was talking about, I don't know about this thing, and Eugenia is always on here with her camera on, so it can be done. So thank you so much for being here. Haki, Professor Madhubuti, I want to put something up on screen if you want to talk about that. I don't know if Paul wants to, but we're probably getting close to it. But I think that you mentioned this, and so I don't know whether you want to talk about the importance of this here. What are folks looking at?
They're looking at Donnell Lee right here at Cornell University. In the middle, I'm at the University of Pittsburgh, where I'm speaking along with Gwendolyn Brooks. But I was the first Black poet in residence at an Ivy League university. That's what that is. And that's the Ebony University article that appeared in Ebony in 1969. And that put me on the map nationally and internationally. That's my classroom. The picture just passed there. That's my classroom with the students. And there's Gwendolyn Brooks right there. Me sitting down. So the point is, I taught a course called Worldview, where I incorporated Black literature, Black music, and Black visual art, all three. And so when you come to that course, you're gonna come out well-rounded because it's not just one subject. Yeah. But that's the piece right there, Don Lee.
So, Haki, Nat, can I go back in?
Yep, absolutely.
Good. Haki, I'm gonna ask you, I'm gonna go back again and ask you, I'll call some names for you, or some names, places, what have you. And if you could just do a few comments on them, and forgive me if I cross you to try to get to another one. Our only challenge is we're running up against the clock, you know?
I understand.
Somebody put in the chat part 1. Okay. But look, Stephen Henderson.
Oh man, come on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at Howard because of Stephen Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
I met Stephen Henderson 2 or 3 years before that because he was at Morehouse. He was at a conference at the University of Madison, and they had asked me to come down to read poetry. That's when we connected. And he published his book, Understanding the New Black Poetry. And he centered me as part of one of the major poets coming out of the 60s. But he was the director of the Institute for the Arts and Humanities at Howard University. And he brought me and John Oliver Killens there and others. Very important. He's a cultural scientist. And he was an excellent poet also. People didn't really know that.
There's a new book out on Steve. That Ethelbert, I think there are a couple of other editors on it, and the name escapes me at this point, but there is a new piece out on him. Amiri Baraka.
I sent you one book where Amiri Baraka was the head of the Congress of African People. But I met Amiri when he was still Leroy Jones. and he was still involved with an interracial marriage and children and so forth. So we didn't hit it off at a serious level then. When Malcolm was assassinated, that's when he moved away, began to move back to Newark, and he became the head of the Congress of African People. And so you see Amelia Baraka, Julian Bond, and Roosevelt Douglas, and others. And if you go on down among the contributors, you see Donnell Lee down there also. So I moved with Mary for many years. And in fact, when he passed, we did a major anthology about his life that's still out. But he was a major contributor. They're really brilliant. Okay.
Yeah. John Killens.
Same thing. I met John Killens in 1968 at Fisk University. Gwendolyn Brooks had gone down in 1967. So when she came down there, she told John Killens, you need to bring this poet from Chicago down at the next conference. That's what he did. And so I blew, I was received like like these young rappers of today. And I got 2 job offers, one from Talladega and the other from Cornell. I wanted to go to Talladega. So I went to Talladega to give the job talk, and the white people who actually ran Talladega said, no way, we're not bringing him here. No. That's when I went to Cornell and did the same talk at Cornell. And the students said, we want Don Lee. That's how that happened.
You've already, well, let me go this way. Mari Evans.
Mari Evans is one of the major poets to come out of the Black Arts movement. And she had made a name, and from Indianapolis, for the most part. Nobody was from Minneapolis. And she had published this major book on Black women. And she published this major anthology on Black women writers. Okay. And she was a fine writer.
Sonia Sanchez.
Same thing. Sonia, but my association with Sonia was a little bit different than with Mari, because we in the middle of the Black Arts movement. Hort Fuller wanted me to go out to California, the Bay Area, and do an article on the writer of Soul and Ice. Okay. And I got to Sonia first, and this is her first book, and I wrote the introduction to her. And Sonia said, you don't want to deal with him. He's a sexist. All right. Don't like Black women. Boom, 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 and all this other stuff. And, showed me you need to do a closer reading of Soul on Ice, which I did. And so rather than doing the article, I asked Sonia Sanchez for a book. She had not published a book at that point. And I said, Broadside Press will publish it. She did a book. I wrote the introduction, and Broadside Press brought it out, and the rest is history.
Professor Madhubuti, I also want to mention that looks like Emory Douglas did the art, and Emory is on our call tonight too.
Emory Douglas is one of the major artists in the world. I'm serious about this. I met Emory in 1969 in Algiers. And he did the poster, I think it's only 1 or 2 posters of my reading with Ed Bullins, with 2 other persons, I can't remember their name now, that we did a reading in Algiers. That's where the Black Panther Party had its headquarters, in national headquarters. But Emory, I got 2 of his books. He is major. Never forget that name, Emory Douglas. He's major, serious.
I'm sorry, Haki. I'm going to go back, and this is a little bit different. Institute of Positive Education, because we haven't touched that too much. And we haven't touched Betty Shabazz schools, if you can talk about them both.
We started the Institute of Positive Education back in 1969. And the reason we named it the Institute of Positive Education, because I was being attacked and everybody being attacked that we in Black struggle with. You can't attack Institute of Positive Education, you know what I'm saying? And that's how I got its name. And we had 2 storefronts in Chicago. One storefront for the Institute of Public Education, another storefront for Third World Press. And we started educating our babies in the community. All right. And where the Black Panther Party had their breakfast programs, we had our education programs. All right. And the interesting thing about the Black Nationalists and the Black Panther Party, we did not have problems like they had on the West Coast. For the most part, we worked together. And so that's how we began to grow. Eventually, we moved from those 2 storefronts and bought a very large complex, less than 10 blocks from there. When I say bought, I felt we don't need to be paying rent to these, these Neanderthals. Let's buy something. And that's what we did. Mm-hmm. And that's when we started the schools from K to 3rd grade. We had our first bookstore. We had a credit union. We bought the farm. We had a typesetting company. Mm-hmm. We had men and women courses, in terms of how to be better men and better women. And of course, Third World Press. And then eventually, so the Institute of Public Education is like our parent group. The Institute of Public Education actually owned our property. All right. And we just all been very serious. So less than 10 years after we had bought that place, we ended up having 3 bookstores, 2 in the city and 1 in the suburb. And other things too. That's when we became very serious vegetarians and vegans and so forth. So that's how it started. So, and this may be interesting. Less than 10 years after that, across from where our first 2 storefronts was a school, a Catholic school. And we used to run toward past that school, going to the park to kind of stay in shape, getting ready for the revolution. And so that school became vacant. So I said, we need to buy that school. So I began to do research and call my Catholic friends, say, who makes the decisions out here? And they said, it's the Bishop Winton Gregory. Because I wasn't getting any kind of playback from downtown with the Catholics. So Winton Gregory was on the south side of Chicago. So my assistant began to call him and said, we need to talk to you, we need to talk to you. And she was leaving Haki Madhubuti. We didn't get no response. Then she left Donnell Lee. We got a call back the next day and saying, are you the poet? I said, yes, I am. I need to talk to Bishop Gregory. It's an emergency. So he said, you got 15 minutes, like two or 3 weeks from now. I said, can I get those 15 minutes? So I told my wife, watch me now. I tied up and everything, took some of the books from Third World Press, got out there. 15 minutes turned in also a couple hours. And when I left Winton Gregory, because he knew some of the same priests I worked with, okay, in terms of struggle. And he called them before I got there to make sure I was okay. And I got a glowing recommendation from them. And when I left him, I had a letter in my hand to Cardinal Bernardine, who was the cardinal at that time. And he said, he not only put on the list, be at the top of the list, but they wanted too much money for the place. They wanted, close to $1 million for the place. I said, it's not worth $1 million. It's a half a block, but it's not worth $1 million. And so we were able to negotiate down and we finally got the price. But and so the Institute of Public Education took the lead on that because we had a board with people with a little bit of resources. The final thing I will say about that, other than our schools are still going, we service over 750 students a day in an African-centered education and in property that we either own or lease, because we lease on the west side. We got two different campuses. Winton Gregory, Bishop Winton Gregory, is now in Rome because he's Cardinal Winton Gregory. And his office, he's in DC. Cardinal Winton Gregory, he's Black and he's very serious.
Haki, we got about 5 minutes, but I have to ask you, and then I'll let you close it out once Haki finishes. My last question to you for today, anyway, is Chancellor Williams.
Oh, come on now.
Mhm.
I met Chancellor Williams in DC. When Andrew Billingsley asked me to come in to talk about taking the position in 1970, he had a copy of the first edition of Destruction of Black Civilization on his desk. And he held it up and said, "Have you read this book?" I said, "No, I hadn't read it." He said, "You need to read this. And the professor who wrote this book teaches here at Howard University. So if you come here and teach with us, you'll be teaching with Dr. Chancellor Williams." I immediately went out and got the book, man. I read the book in about a week, maybe a little bit less. And I started looking for Chancellor Williams. And I found him, and I began to sit in on his classes. And one day he says, "Well, who are you?" At that time, I'm in my early 30s. And he said, "You're not a student here." I said, "No, sir, I teach here on campus." And I said, "Hey, I'm Don Lee, and I got this publishing company in Chicago. Would you consider publishing with Third World Press?" He didn't answer me. I kept coming back. I would take him to dinner. You know what I'm saying? I'm a poet. I know how to do this stuff. And he eventually said, "If I allow you to publish The Destruction of Black Civilization, would you allow me to rewrite it?" Boom. That's it. Not only did we allow him to rewrite it, we got the great Black arts illustrator, Murray DePillars, to do the cover and do the inside artwork. And that's still been there. And that's how it's our bestseller, Destruction of Black Civilization.
Got it. So several people have asked for part 2 of this, Haki. I don't know when we'll get back on it, but I do want to say my real hope is that we can get on record. Haki is the oldest, the Third World Press is anyway, the oldest of our Black legacy publishers. 58 years, 58 years. This is, when we're talking about Black legacy publishers, we're talking about independent publishers. And it's a small group of them now. You have Third World Press, Black Classic Press, Just Us Books, and you have Red Sea Press. Each of those presses, each press, the people who founded those presses came out of struggle.
Right.
Came out of struggle, and that's what makes them distinct. And the fact that they're still independent, my desire is that we'll have a discussion with each of them. And maybe we'll get back together. We'll have all of us together. But this has been great. Haki is holding up the picture.
That's our headquarters, right?
That's the headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very significant that Third World Press began owning property. It's been elusive to the other 3 that I mentioned. So that's a signal, really, really an important event. Nat,
look, Paul,
home.
Paul, don't even talk about trying to coordinate all of you all on one call together. Like, no way.
There's Wade right there.
Ourselves, right, Haki?
Yeah, Wade is on there. Let me put him up here on the camera, because I just know that that's a conversation that you all have so many stories, and you've done so much. You have done so much.
Can you bring Wade in?
I am trying to get Wade.
And if Cheryl is with me,
I think Cheryl is on too.
Okay, hold on. I don't got freed up. Hold on, I'm locked in. Maybe Yeah,
we published Wade's book, Journey, too.
Oh, there he is. Okay, there's Wade. Okay,
Sure did.
And Wade, we're getting ready to do these audio books, and Journey will be one of the audio books.
Okay. Oh, that's great. That's great. Wonderful.
Cheryl does not have her camera on, so I cannot add her on here. But I saw Katura on here earlier, I thought.
Yeah, she was on. Yeah.
And
this
her
has been wonderful.
Well, there you go. Hold on a second, y'all. Because here's the other thing. Look at me. See, I'm one of those where we got to get the women on the pictures too.
Right.
Yes, Katura.
Hey, how you doing, Katura?
So Just Us Books, so that everybody who might not know, everyone knows, Justice Books is it is our largest, our oldest independent publisher of children's books.
Teach.
And we are just so very proud of all of the work that Wade, Cheryl, and Katura have done over the years, and Stefan.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Has
Yeah,
done
right.
over the years, and the whole family. I mean, because this is a family, this is the Hudson family. It's not only them, it's more. But they're also, not only are they publishing these great books, not only are they working with artists and illustrators, but they're also writing books. Wade and
Teach.
Cheryl have opened up a whole new chapter, writing books and exposing us. Again, it's our narrative voice.
Yeah.
Even when they're publishing with other folks, it's our voice that's out there. I just want to acknowledge you guys, and if you want to say something to Haki, we all went to Cuba a few years ago.
We sure did. We sure did. Yeah.
26 is the year to go again. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Haki knows. I mean, he's an inspiration for me. I first became aware of Haki when I was in college, in the mid '60s, and I always wanted to write like Haki as a poet, and blessed to have been able to be published by Third World Press about a year and a half ago. And that is one of the milestones in my career, is being published by Third World Press and Haki.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We love you, Haki. We love you and your legacy and your history. First met you in 1967 at Fisk University, where you were reading, and Nikki Giovanni was a part of the Fisk Writers Workshop. I was in college at Oberlin and took my time to go down there my first year. So it's been an inspiration for all of us to follow in your footsteps. And you know, Sister Gwen is my favorite writer, poet. And as Katura mentioned, The Tiger Who Wore White Gloves is the best children's book ever. So
Thank you.
so much.
Published by Third World Press too.
Amen.
Exactly.
I say.
But you know, Cheryl and Wade, they got the children book, they got it covered. They got it covered for them. And y'all made Usina Eugene Perkins so happy.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Beautiful brother. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
yes.
He was our brother.
Yeah. So see,
So
this is
that brother.
This is
So
why I
Wade
say
and family, we will look forward to having a conversation with you guys. A conversation with Kasahun
Yes.
at World Press, because I think we need to do this to preserve the history and make sure that it's set down right in your words.
Yeah.
As Haki, this is Haki's words here. So really want to thank you guys for being on the call. And thank you for the work you continue to do. Support Black.
Thank you, Paul.
And thank you, Paul. Absolutely.
And Natalie for making this happen.
Absolutely. I believe. Thank you so much.
Natalie, you got
Yep.
it.
No, but I do. I want to echo the thanks. I want to thank everyone who came on the call tonight, because this was a treat. Again, there are books. You all, if you want to know how to support, you're looking at the businesses in front of you that really, people will say, well, what books should they read? Well, just check out the websites of any of these folks and just choose. Just choose. Give gifts. Give them for free. They don't have to be, you can say, well, I read that, but there's somebody you know who hasn't read whatever that book is yet. And so I just encourage everybody to go get the books before somebody tries to shut us down. We're not trying to go there, but
It's coming.
Yep. As absolutely.
It's coming.
so go get those books. Our kids need them. Our teenagers desperately need those books. And there's nothing about there's a funny story where I think that I've been around Paul's family for a while, and you have some of his kids talk about the books he had them reading, when they were in their young years. So there's no too young to read Marcus Garvey. There's no too young to read Chancellor Williams. It's like we have to pull those books out and we have to read them. You all have to buy them and you have to give them as gifts. So that's my plug. Again, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank the team. who was here to make this happen. We will be back. There's a couple things I think that you'll see in our email that's coming out. Where I think Paul's doing a workshop in Baltimore, so for printing. So you all want to make sure that you get those emails. Please share those emails.
Can
And
we just shout our team? I know you mentioned
yes,
them.
yes, yes, yes. Let me go find them. Let me
One
give them.
Gaza is up there. I can see one Gaza.
Yep, we got. Hold on. Let me do some. Let me do some magic over here with some of these. Uh-oh, now I've lost y'all. Okay. All right, let me just switch out some of these folks because I want people to know. Look, you heard all of them talking about the folks they met, the people who helped make it happen. Well, I want to add on here. Where y'all at? Stephanie? We got Wangaza. Y'all at the top of my list over here. Where you at? I'm going to add Xavier, who is a volunteer with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Xavier.
Stephanie needs to start hers. And then where did Wangaza go? Oh, there she is.
One
All right, I
Gaza's at
got her.
the top. Mhm.
And we saw her earlier as she opened our meeting up the right way.
And do you see my beautiful wife on there?
I will look for your beauty. I won't make any jokes because I'm not gonna have Roz chasing me down. Y'all don't realize Roz does not have her camera on,
Okay, that's cool. That's cool.
but she is in the room. So,
Look, thank everybody. And again, Nat, how long will it take for us to get this up?
Paul always asks me this, y'all. This is why he says I'm the one who
Well,
runs
look,
it.
one of the things
So,
is on, we have a couple of people from the UK on. Margaret Busby is on, like I said, but also Khadija George was on, and she's doing a book on Black book selling. And so she wants access to this interview, Haki.
Oh, okay.
okay. So I think probably within the next 3 to 4 days we should be able to get it up. We just have to. I'm the one here. If you don't see it, I'm the one to
That's her.
to beat over the head if you don't see it. But I'm gonna look to get this up. It should be pretty clean. Shouldn't have to do much editing to it, and it'll be up on our YouTube page. So if you have not subscribed, please subscribe. And take your chat, folks. Whatever's in that chat, hit that button and save that chat because you want those book links, you want those bookstore links. You need those. So save your chats. But we'll get the video up in the next couple days. All right.
I want to say one thing. Brother
Sure.
Haki, can you please consider doing an historical documentary or having one done, capturing all of this history in a documentary form? I think that is so important.
Yes, we can get somebody who's going to do it.
I hear you. I hear you.
That's
I
the
hear
major
you.
problem with getting the workers to do the work. One and
Yeah.
two, again, finding the resources. That's why we have to call on people out here to not only send resources and money themselves, but go to their families and extended family to support all of us, to buy all of our books and so forth.
Right.
And I guess the final word I want to say is that my wife and I have been together over 55 years. And her working name is Dr. Carol D. Lee. And she's she's brilliant. She's one of the major educators in the world. Look her up, Dr. Carol D. Lee. And she is, partially responsible for us creating all of this, especially our schools. They call her Mama Safisha in the schools. So.
All right.
So again, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to be logging off. I'm going to ask my team to stay on, but the rest of y'all got to go. So
thank you again.
This has been good. Haki, thank you
Thank you.
so much for the time. Thank you for all of your contributions. Thank you for all of the people that you've nurtured along, including me, and continue to nurture along. So thank you so much, brother.
Give my best to Roz and everybody else.
Will do, brother.
All right, take care now.
We'll talk.
Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. Good meeting you, sister.
More than welcome. Everybody have a good evening. Okay, and they are leaving. Let me end the recording.
Natalie, I'll look out for any stragglers.
Okay,
and
thank
remove
you.
them. Because folks, sometimes step away from the computer